So just general market performance, in your view, I mean, obviously share prices have dropped significantly.
Good afternoon, Lerato. Yes, the share prices continue on the downward trend. It's a bearish market, and the Kenyan market pretty much just picked up where the global markets left off yesterday. We saw a global sell-off across the world where equities really took a slump, and commodity prices improving significantly. But on the local market today, not too much news. The bearish trend continuing. Only positive news that stood out was, I think, Trans-Century and Kenyan Market. Otherwise, other than that, not too much positive news.
Let's talk about Trans-Century, because there were concerns that since listing in July, the share price has dropped 50%. So investors were feeling really squeezed as they didn't see any prospects for returns. Today, that price rebounding 8%, but from a 50% low, I mean, it's a modest gain, some would argue, at this stage.
Indeed, it is a modest gain. The high was at 60 shillings at IPO. Initially, the stock was listed. That was just shy of my 65 shilling expectation. And ever since, we've seen it come down on a slightly slope. So Trans-Century, unfortunately, it has not been particularly positive for the market. And earlier, a few months ago, we saw that some bondholders moving towards the equity side by converting their bond holdings.
Now, Trans-Century being down is not a function of the company's fundamentals. It's got great assets as an investment house. Is it really a function of the market and the timing at which they came to market?
I think it is purely a timing issue, and unfortunately, there is not too much they can do about that at this point in time. On the more positive side, though, is that when they came into the market, it was really a listing by introduction. It wasn't an IPO per se. So that is at least some positive out of the very negative news that the share has.
Let's talk about Kenyan Market. The share price is at 10 shillings, so it's a gain of 0.5%. We do know that some statements have been made as the results were released that they're on an acquisitive drive in other African markets, particularly in terms of acquiring downstream assets. They're trying to set themselves up for a potential takeover by interested parties in India and China and Malaysia. Tell us about their strategy going forward and whether or not Kenyan Market would be a great acquisition for those who might want to take it over.
The Kenyan Market strategy has for a long time been to expand across Africa, and more or less in terms of the southern African part. So that has really put them and should put them as a prime picking for the global investor, ideally from the Eastern Asia or Middle East region, who really want exposure into Africa. So Kenyan Market, the expansion drive is absolutely great, and what they really benefit from is the great exposure towards the region, as opposed to Total, who have a purely Kenyan-centric position, but which they are now trying to improve and also diversify across the region.